Hi, welcome back to another episode of the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm here with Alberto Piña from Braustin Homes, and we've got a really great conversation to talk about bootstrapping and all the great things that Braustin Homes is here doing in San Antonio and South Texas. Thanks for coming, Alberto.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
So one thing we always like to do is start off with the journey that all entrepreneurs take, because they're very similar, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, people had the job, the job, and said they want something more and made that decision to say, all right, I'm going to do a side hustle that becomes the main hustle, or you know what, I'm just going to go jump in. What was it for you?
I got laid off the day before Thanksgiving. And then that January, we started Braustin. It's one of those things I didn't have a job, didn't have a choice, and just kind of forced into it.
What were you doing at that time before you got laid off?
I was in the same industry.
Okay.
And I'd been in this industry for a good while, and done the sales, done the management, was running an oil service division when oil was hot, and really seeing all sides of it, and just, the entire time felt like the industry wasn't moving into the future the way the rest of the world was.
Right.
But, big corporate, a lot of times they ask for feedback and opinions, and they'll listen, and then they don't do anything with it. And
right.
So, getting laid off is never fun. It was definitely scary sitting around dinner table Thanksgiving. But right after that, it was a blank canvas, a blank slate for us to do what we wanted to do.
So this is, again, we've always heard fascinating stories. So is this 2019, 2020?
This was, Thanksgiving 2016.
2016,
yeah, the
okay.
day right before.
Okay.
And then we started January 2017.
So talk to me about how, because this episode's a lot about bootstrapping, because, again, you get to your first seed round in 2020, if I remember right, and we'll get to that in a second. But we got 4 years here of bootstrapping, which for those that don't know, what is bootstrapping? Bootstrapping is using your own funds or taking loans from family sometimes to basically fund yourselves as opposed to outside investors. And I'd love to hear if that was similar for you. But we got 4 years here and no income because life has just thrown you a curveball that you're jumping in. How did you make that decision that said, okay, instead of finding another job, I'm just going to do this? What tell us a little bit about that decision.
My brother and I had worked in the industry, and it was very frustrating seeing the world change in an industry that hadn't changed in 4 decades.
Right.
And so that was a huge part of it. We got to the point where if we wanted things to change, we realized we were going to just have to do it ourselves. Setting up to not make a penny for a while is definitely nerve-wracking and scary. But, my brother and I had both come up in sales, and it's always been commission-based. So, working without a lifeline underneath or a net to catch you is just kind of all we knew. From way back when we wanted Game Boys, and our folks said go make some money. So
you millennials, y'all don't know what a Game Boy is. Google it. We all had one, and when it broke, I had to get mine paid for myself too to fix it. So I get it.
Yeah.
Talk about the industry at that time. So, we're talking mobile homes, manufactured housing at that time. What was the industry like? What did you see in your career prior to making that choice? What was that 40-year trend?
We liken it to, used car sales back in the 80s, where it's a lot of, even to this day, a lot of kind of games and gimmicks, but wait, there's more. And, if you sign today and today only, whatever. And beyond that, even the marketing strategies and just really the customer interaction in general was kind of stuck in the way it always been. And, they've been very successful that way, but, companies like Amazon were changing customer perceptions across everything. Once you buy something with Amazon, you want that everywhere you go.
That's right.
And we saw that that's the way the world was going and our industry was going before COVID. Now COVID's just accelerated those trends by a decade or so.
Right. So you make the decision to jump, you see the industry. Tell us about those early days. What was it like from all right, we're going to make a change. Industry's been like this for, who knows how long, since the beginning of dinosaurs maybe. And so your guys are going to make a change, and you got to do it all with your own dime.
Yeah.
Give us a couple stories there about how y'all are looking at how you're going to be innovative or how you're going to fund this thing, or maybe both.
Yeah. So the biggest change we wanted to make was just e-commerce. You know, we're not overly smart, so a lot of our success has come from just copying what other folks have done in other industries and throwing it behind a double wide. And so you look at e-commerce, that wasn't anything new, but in our space, it was brand new.
Right.
So little things like putting upfront pricing online, so you knew what you were going to spend before you called somebody, and really focusing on the power of the internet to let folks answer all their questions before they called us. Even coming up in sales our whole career, we know, I mean, people just don't want to talk to salespeople. You know, they need them to buy certain things, but if they can buy it without talking to a salesperson, that's what people want.
Right.
And so out the gate, I mean, we didn't know how we were going to build it. But we felt that's what needed to be built. And then going back to some of those lessons from our folks with the Game Boy, you know, door to door, knocking to see if people wanted their lawns mowed was definitely helpful. And but our father growing up, he was very adamant that it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And so we were fortunate that we had some savings, and you know, we cleared out the life savings to throw it down on the business. And
right.
At the time, we didn't even know you could start a company with other people's money, or we just didn't. We weren't educated on that. So you know, going into it, it was you know, this is what we got, and we got to make the most of it, and then make sure we take whatever this is and turn it into more money through sales.
You know, it's funny because when the comment you just made of I didn't know I could use other people's money, and we've never done this before. A lot of people just assume, well, those people that start businesses, like, yeah, they know how to do that. That's really not the answer, actually. Right. Your venture capitalists and stuff, yeah, they know how to do this because this is what they do all day. But entrepreneurs many times are very, very new to it. And the lessons that you've learned, I mean, from, you know, that day in 2016 to as we sit here in 2022, I'm sure your, you know, education of how this all works of a startup is, you know, completely different.
Yeah.
Let me ask this. Did you guys start off with a just traditional brick and mortar trying to layer in some of the innovations, or how did y'all go approach the first concept of Braustin Homes?
You know, bootstrapping and having a limited budget's what led to a lot of the innovations. We couldn't afford a brick and mortar, so
okay.
You know, it had to be online. At first, that was just what we could afford, and then that became, you know, our key differentiator. But that's how we landed at Geekdom. I think it was like $50 a month, and you got internet, you got a free printer, all the things that we just didn't have the extra cash to spend.
Right.
So we just kind of landed there because it was inexpensive. And that really ended up being probably the biggest change to where we went as a business. You know, starting when you're surrounded by people that think the way tech people think, it you know, really helps when you're trying to create something new in a space that just has refused to think that way for 40 years.
No, it's true. We've had several guests in here talk about just resourcefulness, because it's, you know, there's not just the, oh, well, you go get the book, you read the book, you apply the book, and it'll tell you how to start a mobile manufacturing home business. That just doesn't exist, right? But being around the environment or the resources that are available are huge to be able to learn that stuff. So 2016, right? We make the change. When do y'all move into Geekdom?
The second week of January 2017.
Okay, so we're in 2017. Yeah. What are you guys working on? What's the beginning of the innovation of it? Is it online? I mean, do you have web development skills?
I don't. No.
I didn't think you did. I don't either.
Yeah.
How did y'all overcome those type of things? Like, how did you build the right team, bootstrapping? Because, again, you know, these are the type of things that people just assume, oh, well, these tech companies, I mean, the owner, they just kind of did it all their own and brought their couple friends together. But, I mean, you're selling manufactured homes, mobile homes, and you're moving it to the internet. How did you build that initial team?
So we had worked with folks. I mean, I was 10 years or 9 years in the industry before all this. So I'd worked with a number of folks, and we brought in someone that built the initial website. That was 4 or 5 pages of a website. It wasn't much.
Right.
And then it was just from the start of our business, anything we wanted, the culture of Braustin's been, if you want it, go sell your way into it. And so we wanted an upgraded website, or we wanted, you know, an admin assistant, or all the things that, you know, you think of a traditional business, they already have that. When you're starting off, you got to earn your way into it. And that's, you know, where we were fortunate is that there was already a product, right? The product existed, so the ability for us to sell a thing more than what we paid for the thing and make that money was there. And that's what allowed us to, you know, work our way into building the rest of the team and all the other stuff in those first 4 years.
What was the biggest challenge you faced during that bootstrapping phase, just because you were bootstrapping?
I mean, when you have limited funds, you've really got to pick what are the priorities. What needs the money the most? Everything thinks it needs the money, but what is it that needs it the most?
Right.
And in those first probably 6 months, the focus was what investment can we make today that's going to come back with friends very quickly, so that we can go do more of it and really just stay alive in those first few months.
Yeah. I'm assuming you guys, once you got your website out, you had those costs that you were able to generate revenue. What was your revenue model at that point in time?
So the simplest way is we buy the parts from the factory.
Okay.
You know, you think of factory built housing, it's like grown folks Legos. You buy bricks or blocks, and then what our team did is we assembled them on site and made them to an actual house.
Okay.
Right. So again, we had those relationships from previously in our career, and we were able to secure things, you know, different factory contracts and flooring lines of credit, pretty much off a resume, because we just didn't have a lot of financial strength behind us at the moment. And then we got a call for our first customer called like a week after we launched the website.
Wow.
And we weren't ready to have someone actually want to buy from us. And then we told them that. We were very upfront. Hey, you know, we're kind of figuring this out as we go.
Right.
But if you're up for it and down for the ride, we'll get you taken care of one way or another. And you know, still to this day, we're good buddies. His name's Leroy, and we're actually working on a car together. He's a mechanic. And the best customer ever. He was a mechanic at Anheuser-Busch. So every month we were getting a case of the latest and greatest beer. You know, he's probably fixed everybody's car on the team at this point.
Wow. How did he find you?
Google or Facebook or.
So that's another just mystery that people think, oh, okay, well, you know, just build it and they will come. They don't. And so marketing is massive. You know, you watch Shark Tank and they always want to know what's your cost to customer acquisition. Yeah. The reality is with all now today, maybe in 2017 a little bit less, but still on the increase. I mean, the marketing world and the digital space, I mean, it's a complete jungle that, you know, and I call it a jungle because I'm not sure anybody knows the rules other than, you know, Facebook and Google. How did you get that first customer? I guess maybe it was luck, but how do y'all do that today? How have you addressed that concern moving forward? Because that's going to be a massive spend for you guys when you're bootstrapping, is your marketing costs.
Yeah. We were fortunate in that, you know, if you look at what you need for go-to-market, Jason is sales, and marketing's always been my favorite part of the business.
Okay.
And so, you know, we had very limited ad budget, but when you look at social media advertising, the bulk of the cost isn't the ad spend. It's paying for people to manage it and put it in the right places and hoping they get it right.
Right.
So we were fortunate that we had that part locked down.
Okay.
And then as we've grown, adding different things and, you know, big focus on content marketing and things like podcasts or videos and out the gate starting on stuff that just answer people's questions.
Right.
And knowing that if we did it consistently, that eventually it would turn into this web that would be very powerful down the road.
Okay. Let's talk fast forward a little bit to where, I guess from a culture standpoint. When we talked last, you had told me that you guys had a for-profit but for people, most importantly, culture. Mm-hmm. Where did that come into play? How does that today, something that you guys exemplify every day, how do you manage that culture?
I think it started, you know, that first couple weeks after getting laid off when, you know, I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. You know, and my wife had gone, and I had gone through the corporate world where this industry can be very, very profitable, and I always, even new hires on the team, we tell them, starting this, we want to do it different, because the year I made the most financially was also the year that I was the most miserable going to work. And obviously you got to make enough to pay your bills, but at some point more money does not mean more happiness in life. And when Elsa and I were having those initial discussions, because I had to get her permission to clear out our life savings and work for free for a year and a half, it was, there were several job offers on the table that, short term would have been much more lucrative, but I knew where that was going to end up, and just had no desire to go do that anymore. So there was that part, knowing that from past experience, more money doesn't always translate to more happiness. Sometimes it can actually go the other route.
Right.
And then we're in the affordable housing space, and so it's not like we're selling something people want. People have to have a house, and when you look at the folks we're serving through our industry as a whole, these aren't people that have extra money to just waste, and so you've got to be mindful of being the force for good in that industry too, and not being grimy or trying to rip people off. These aren't the people that have extra money to be taken advantage of.
Right.
And so I think it was a combination of those two things. And then as we've hired and grown the team, skill set's great, but the cultural fit is of equal importance when we're bringing on a team member.
How do you evaluate that cultural fit? Because I know this is somewhat of a family enterprise, right? Your brother, I guess, is involved somewhat in this. So I know you've got probably just a natural family culture here as well. But when bringing on a new person, how do you interview, or how do you validate cultural fit? Is that something you guys do consciously, or is it more of a aggregate, hey, do you think they'll fit in the family? Let's let them in the family. How do y'all go about it?
Yeah, so it's, ultimately the team ends up interviewing anybody before they come on. Okay. And we collect, it's not full-blown democracy, but we collect everybody's opinions. And we spend just as much time together as we do with our family back home. So, it's helpful that we like working with each other. And then focusing on, the big thing, it seems like a family outside looking in, and inside, and everybody gets along great, and it definitely feels that way. But our focus has always been, we're building a team, not a family, and they're very different, right?
Right.
A successful team can feel just as tight-knit as a family.
Right.
But the difference is you get, with a team, you get to pick who's on the team, and look for all-star players in those individual positions, and focus on folks that are going to do their job, no more, no less, just play that role.
Right.
And we're all going to win, right? And when done well, it feels like a family. But I've seen a lot of businesses that say they're like a family, and then you get laid off the day before Thanksgiving, and you realize it's not like a family.
It's true.
So out the gate, we just want to be very clear and with everybody. We have a dedicated mission. We need rock stars on this team, and at some point, if you're not one, we got to make difficult decisions. So let's, we don't want to trick people into thinking it's one thing when it's not.
Sure.
But at the same time, top performers want to be around other top performers.
That's true.
And if you start without out the gate, then we were talking about the Crimson Tide.
I don't bring up.
Yeah, I'll bring it up because they're one of the most dominant.
But if you
teams.
want to, I will go there with you, brother.
And Nick Saban's a great example. I lean on Coach Pop a lot for that, and he always says they look for people who have gotten over themselves, and that's a big part of it too. Looking for folks that want to be a part of the whole, not just me.
Right.
And if you do it right, it is just as powerful as a family.
It's even more powerful because the resiliency that you can have and the long-term versus just a short-term impact is massive. Yeah. Absolutely massive. 100%. No, that's very, very well said, including the Alabama plug. Thank you. All right, so let's get to July. I think it was July 2020. Right before then, you guys are largely online. That's been moving, and we get to the hybrid location in Atascosa County. Is that where it was? Great. Yeah. Tell us about that. Tell us about how the evolution of Braustin Homes moved to hybrid, what that hybrid looks like.
So if we back up probably 6 months before that, we had opened a kiosk inside of an H-E-B grocery store in New Braunfels.
Okay.
You know, where they have the banks and the barbers and all that.
Yep.
So and inside that kiosk, we had different tech components. So we were using augmented reality to where if you had our app and you looked at a canvas print of one of our customers, that canvas would turn into a video of that family telling their story.
Oh, wow.
And we had those all around. And if you looked at a picture of the kitchen of one of our homes, it turned into a virtual walkthrough. So like all these canvases on the wall were almost like flat screen TVs if you had the app. And then we had a table with the Oculus headsets where you could tour any of our homes in virtual reality. And then in the very back, there was a couch and a TV where you could video chat with one of our team members if you had questions.
Okay.
And so just like dang near everything we've done, we try stuff, and then we ask customers what they think, and they ultimately tell you what you got to do. And the feedback we kept getting is, hey, this is really cool, but we want to see a house.
So it was enough to get them interested, but at the end of the day, their actual decision, they needed to touch it, not just see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to that point, we had helped, most of the families we help, we never meet. It's all online over the phone, which was a lot crazier then than it was post-COVID. And so the H-E-B kiosk was an attempt to have a physical interaction beyond just the digital. And so from there, listening to the customers, we decided, this would be really cool if we put this behind what looks like a dealership, right? So what looks like what everybody else has, we're just not there. And initially we were building it with a focus on a better customer experience.
Okay.
Again, folks just don't want to talk to salespeople, right? If I can do it without, I know I'm a sales guy. I don't want to talk to salespeople. And so that's
good. I'm not alone then, because no offense to the sales guys out there.
No, the good ones know it.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, we just kind of lucked out. We were building this for a better customer experience. We launched it the month after COVID shut down the country.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing that from you guys. Yeah.
And so, ultimately what it ended up being, it looks like a traditional dealership. We have 9 homes, 9 models that people could walk through. None of us are there. And at the time we were all remote. We went full remote a week before the mayor shut down San Antonio, in part just because we could.
Wait a minute, nobody's there?
There's one person there that opens the door and makes sure things.
Okay.
So we actually built it to be completely personless. The insurance companies thought, if someone were to slip and fall, we should have a person there. So
these lawyers, you can never do
lawyers and insurance
they always
companies
come after you.
So we actually built it to be, even now, there's smart locks. We don't need a person there.
Right. That's fast. That's awesome.
But we had to.
Yeah.
So when we all went remote, it was a way for a customer to walk through a model, but then be talking to a salesperson and getting their questions answered when they're, at their house or wherever they ended up being during those times.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we built to be more enjoyable also happened to be safer when all this stuff hit.
Right.
And now safety is part of the customer experience. It's been 2 years of this. It's just part of it.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
But I say luck because we didn't know what we were building was going to be as relevant as it was. And we were really prepared for all sorts of objections. It is borderline crazy to buy a house from someone that's 500 miles away, buying from someone you've never physically met, and then buying a house you've never physically seen.
That's
right?
true.
And then just trusting that it shows up the way you thought it would after we've already gotten your money, right? So there's a lot of trust that has to be built. And so we were prepared for all sorts of objections with the new dealership, and for folks to insist that I want somebody here and yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, nobody cared about whether anybody was there in person or not. And we just happened to have that already built.
Let me ask you this. It's a little bit less relevant right now, but it used to be extremely relevant. And I think that, in my personal opinion, it's going to come back to being relevant. How do you deal with lower socioeconomic barriers with regard to their trust of technology? Right, you tend to see that if there's studies that are out there that we've looked at is lower socioeconomic. We're a lot in healthcare, so we see that a lot. They're just going to be less technology savvy and trusting of technology to engage. prior to COVID, because COVID changed a lot of that, right? Because necessity negated fear. How did you see that at all? What were ways, maybe some examples that you were able to address some of those trust of technology or even just accessibility issues for some people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that had been a focus on ours out the gate. With technology, at least built in Braustin, it was a focus on technology that actually moved the needle, right? There's all sorts of things where, you can use technology just because it's cool, but it doesn't do much, at least at this point, right? But even if you look at the power of a smartphone and now the cost of smartphones, everybody has a smartphone, regardless of your income level. It might be not be the latest and greatest,
right?
But a smartphone from 5 generations ago is more powerful than a computer was a decade ago.
True.
And so the bulk of our focus was on the experience and accessibility through that device, from the banking to the shopping, the augmented reality. All of that was centered around the smartphone device.
How did you guys go out and develop that? Did you offshore it? Did y'all hire your own development team? Was it a combination? Just because I'm sure many people always want to understand, how did you build that internally or externally?
That's where Geekdom was just so critical. We'd all used software, but we didn't realize when we got there that we were going to build software for ourselves.
Right.
Until we met some developers down there, and just random conversations and interactions ended up into a lot of that. And again, bootstrapping, you've got more time than money, and we realized that sales and marketing was a skill set that a lot of folks, especially if they were web developers or software developers, might not have that skill set.
That's right.
And so is this barter economy. I'll help you build a marketing plan and build your ad sets on Facebook if you build an app for us or build an MVP. And that's initially how a lot of that went. As we sold more, we had a little more funds to pay for folks. And initially we paid for outside folks to help. And then at this point, we've got our own dev team internally. And
right.
It just moves a little quicker when it's internal.
Yeah, and that's it's a fascinating aspect, is the barter economy, which people don't realize does exist, very much so. Especially in the startup world, where cash, is difficult to get. I mean, people think, oh, well, you can just, we're going to talk in a second where you guys were raising, a couple $1 million. It wasn't just, hey, we have this idea, thank you very much, we'll take your $2 million and we'll go execute. That's just not how it works. So it's fascinating to hear about the barter economy that can help in those times. Let me ask you this. This is one of those key questions I just wanted to make sure we got out. So can you give some advice to the young or just young company? What are those top 3 considerations if they're thinking they're going to bootstrap their startup? Can you give them 1 or 2, maybe even 3, just key considerations now that you look back with all that wisdom you've got?
I think number 1 is, some our pops taught us way back when. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. And had we not started investing in IRAs and 401ks at 18, 19 years old, there wouldn't have been anything in there to take out our life savings. So that was a big part of it. I think the second one is really making a list and picking what the priorities are, and that's tough to do when you're starting a business because everything's on fire. Everything needs you, needs your time, needs your money. But it was really a focus on what's going to move the needle the most, and then that's what gets time and money the quickest, right? And so for us, and not every company has a product or a way to make revenue out the gate. Some need, and that's where VC and angels come in. Some need that money to build the thing and then hope that people are going to pay for the thing. And so we were fortunate in that we already had a product to sell. We just needed to sell it.
Right.
Right. So I think learning the skills, even if you're not going to be a salesperson, being the CEO of a business is sales, regardless of whether that's the official title. You're either selling banks or investors or team members. So learning sales in some form or fashion, I think, is an invaluable skill in business.
Well, and you bring this up and you keep saying luck, and people will say this when they're on. I'm like, it's not luck. Because, I mean, you picked an industry that could generate cash, right? You could generate revenue while you were bringing about your innovation. And let's talk about one of those innovations, your recent innovation there, which is the Porch Pass. What's that next evolution? So we talked about, just a website, moved into the hybrid, or the kiosk, then into the hybrid. Now we've got Porch Pass. What is Porch Pass? Where are you guys looking to take the company now?
Yeah, so when you look at, the three basic things that people need to buy and build a home in this industry, it's they got to pick the house, they got to pick the land where it's going to go, and then ultimately there's a financing component for the vast majority of it. Being in the affordable housing space, that we get to see some cash buyers, but that's not the bulk of who we're building this experience for. And financing, even outside of factory built housing, really hasn't innovated much.
Right.
And when you look at what COVID just accelerated, this gig economy, what initially started is we had to say no to people because we're not the banks, and so if the banks say no, it's sorry. We always if I was a bank, I'd be the worst bank ever. Everybody would get a loan, everybody would get a house, but that's not the world we live in. And after saying no to folks that we understood their journey because we had lived it, the money's there. Someone, for instance, working for Uber and Lyft, make $40 an hour, but to a traditional lender, if you don't have a 2-year history working for both companies, your money doesn't exist.
That's right.
And we'd see welders going from one company to the next in the oil patch with a 10-year job history. And they jump from W-2 to 1099 to get a raise.
Right.
But now all of a sudden that money doesn't count for 2 years.
That's right.
And so there was a lot of we kept getting those customers, and our sales team would be frustrated that they couldn't help this person that really should get a loan. Checked all the boxes, good credit, good down payment. And just like a lot of this stuff, we saw it so much to the point where we figured we just got to build this thing and go fix that problem, right? So Porch Pass is our first, it's a fintech product. And again, without Geekdom and now the investors we were able to partner with, that doesn't happen, right? We didn't even know what fintech was when we got there. But it's a way for us to improve access to home ownership by helping folks that are solopreneurs or gig economy workers build the home they want to build today, and then work with our team to get all those ducks in a row. The tax history, a lot of folks just don't even know.
Right.
Our first customer, his P&L was a shoebox.
Right.
And that works for him, but it doesn't work for a bank. And so a lot of it's just the education component. But making plenty of money. No reason he won't be able to pay for the house. He just doesn't have the formal tax documents that a lender wants to see.
Underwriters.
Yeah.
Worse than lawyers.
Well, it's better than what led to the 07-08 housing crash. So it's good that they're there and have a process. But the bulk of what we see isn't that these folks aren't. I mean, this isn't subprime lending. It's not.
Right.
They have the money. They have great credit. They have a history.
They just don't meet the traditional profile for what the major underwriters are looking for, right? So you're going to write, I'm assuming you guys have a different profile that you say we'll underwrite in these, which most traditional banks won't, and you got a way to get them connected? Or do you package them to the other banks that are willing to take them and basically have them all teed up for the other banks, or do you guys actually do the underwriting yourselves?
Yeah, so it's internal underwriting, and it's using our software does a lot of that for us, and it looks for things that you just can't see on a credit report. Even the credit reporting itself is decades old.
It is.
And if I'm underwriting for, say, a home, the single biggest data point I want to know is have you paid for the home you live in currently on time?
Right.
Over the course, and you can't see that in a credit report unless it was, foreclosed on or the apartment, filed. But the bulk of folks, you don't see that history. Whereas through our underwriting, we can see, that payment that goes out on the first every time. So even beyond counting money that traditional lenders can't, we believe our underwriting's more efficient because we can see key data points like their housing payment that you're not going to see on a credit report.
Right.
But at this point, we're doing the underwriting, and then the biggest there's a lot of home buyer education behind this.
Okay.
Right. And it's not that these folks don't qualify; they just don't know the rules of the game, so they don't know how to play it.
Fascinating. And so it sounds like you innovated in a space that you guys were running into problems on the closing the sale based upon financing to do this. So it's fascinating. You mentioned here, and I do I do want to talk about it, is the seed round, or was it a Series A?
Seed round.
Seed round.
Yeah.
One of the conversations I've had with a lot of people, including on this, is how did you go about saying you needed to raise capital? Second part, how much capital? And then the most important question I always get asked is, for how much equity?
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit of insight as to those three factors?
Yeah. Well, the first one, deciding did we want to raise, I mean, that really started 2 years before we actually did. And this is for any entrepreneur thinking they might want to go that path. You don't want to start the fundraising process when you need money.
Right.
It's
too late.
Yeah, too late. But it started with a genuine curiosity, and I remember I saw a tweet or a news story about something Pat Matthews had done at Active Capital, and I was just curious how that worked. So I sent him a DM on Twitter. He answered really quick, which was surprising. We grabbed lunch. That turned into a pitch with him and Graham Weston. And then we just had a conversation for a couple of years on what that was like. In some of the advice he gave, which I think holds true for any entrepreneur, you don't want to just take money just to take it.
Correct.
Like, what are you going to do with it? And that's ultimately when we had that decision. Let's go raise some money, is we had gotten to the point where now lack of capital was slowing down growth. Mm-hmm. We had the dealerships. We're in the middle of COVID. We know this thing, the market has screamed loud and clear. We want this and we want more of it. And now we can't go as fast as we want because of lack of capital.
Right.
And that's when you want to go raise money. And that was the advice Pat Matthews had given us way back when, a couple of years before that. And along that way, we ended up having a couple lunches with Pat Condon. Mike Troy and I went fishing and had some conversations, but it started with just curiosity on what that is.
Right.
Again, we didn't even know other people would give you money to go build something. So that was mind blowing in and of its own. And then, in 2020, Jason and I had a couple of choices to make. We had built at that point a successful, sustainable small business. To where he and I could go be fishing guides the rest of our life, and Braustin would spit off income for us to live, right? But the path, we wanted to dominate an industry. We didn't start Braustin. We started Braustin to change an industry. And you can't change an industry without being so financially successful that it forces the change. Just like CarMax with used cars.
Right.
Used car sales would have been what it was if CarMax wouldn't have made it so financially impossible to compete the way it had always been. Mm-hmm. And that's always been our goal. And so once we had the dealership concept and the market told us, hey, we want more of this. And then thinking, is this going to still be something people want after COVID? I don't think people are going to want to talk to salespeople more post-COVID. That was the time for us. Let's throw some gas on the fire. The things are already working. This company makes money. It will make more money if we can do more things. Mm-hmm. And then that's when we decided to go raise funds. And because we had started off just asking questions and going to lunches and just out of curiosity, we already knew who we wanted to raise the funds from. We're very picky in who we want, because we didn't just want money. We wanted minds behind the money.
Right.
And really minds behind the money to plug the holes that we felt we had. Right. And so when you look at, the folks we brought in, Pat Condon's on the board, just incredible tech mind. Mike Troy, incredible tech mind. Pat Matthews, incredible tech mind. Graham Weston, incredible tech mind. And so we wanted folks that thought differently than us and that knew the tech component way better than we ever would. We knew double wides. We knew affordable housing. But then you put the two together,
right?
It's a deadly combination.
Well, and it's something that I've had conversations many times with entrepreneurs about. Is one of those key aspects is make sure you understand who your investor is, not just they have a checkbook. That shouldn't be the qualifier.
Yeah.
Are they adding value, not just with their money, but there's a lot of money out there, but are they adding value to your organization? Because every single name you just listed right there, extremely well known in the community, extremely community focused, and that's the kind of person. the opposite of that exists as well. I'll give you money, but now you work for me, as opposed to we work, together to make something bigger. And evaluating that at the beginning is critical. Great tactic to do that. Number one, very well known in the community, everybody you just mentioned. But two, you get to build that personal relationship well before you ever have that conversation about money. You already know what that relationship looked like, coming in. And it's a mistake some people make. They need the money and they take it without understanding what is, there's always some strings that come with it. And some of those strings are a whole lot thicker and tighter than others but it's still a string.
Right.
What was the biggest lesson or aha or surprise that you had through the fundraising effort? You're a little atypical in the fact that you basically built that relationship longer. I'm assuming you had a commitment to close, very short window. In fact, I remember you raising that. It seemed like it was really quick that you were doing the offering and closed it. But still, what was a big aha for you or something that you just didn't expect from raising the capital?
I mean, our fundraise was, and even our investors, so this isn't typical, so I think the work and time and just the relationships we built 2 years prior to that is what led to it being so quick. I mean, it was lightning fast, but it was lightning fast because not only had we built the relationships, they knew us, we knew them, but they also knew the business, and we had been talking and what originally started out as asking questions, turned to them getting to ask questions and get to know our business over the course of 2 years.
Right.
And so we had a history of making money. We were ramen profitable. We were cash flow positive. And so the risk profile was much smaller than, an idea that we hope works out.
Right.
This already worked. We just want to do more of it. We did end up transitioning the company from an LLC to a full-blown corporation and those little things and lots of paperwork. I mean, the paperwork took more time than the yeses took to get.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, there weren't really too many surprises for us in that process. I think we were just very fortunate at how easy that was.
Right.
Because of the relationships we built, prior to that. But I've heard, I know that's not the norm, and that's, normally it's not that quick and that easy there.
Well, I smile because as a lawyer, you just proved out what I tell investors, or I tell small business owners all the time is, you don't have to start a C Corp right at the beginning and start paying the taxes and everything else. I mean, thank you, because now I could say, hey, Braustin Homes, I mean, they started off as an LLC, pass your entity, and then when the big money came, which is what I always say, merge that thing over into a Delaware C Corp, and investors understand as long as they're getting everything there that's how it is. Pay the money to set something that complex up when you're getting money in versus as a bootstrapper when every single dime matters and you don't want to pay your lawyers for a bunch of stuff that you may need 2 years from now. Well, let me ask you a couple of final questions here. I mean, this has been fascinating. I guess the last two questions are pretty similar. What's it look like next on your journey as far as you did a seed round and next thing you know is it eventually a Series A, or you're looking at strategic acquisition, IPO. I think we talked about sustainability. And then technology-wise, so after the funding stuff, technology-wise, what's next for Braustin Homes?
Yeah. This has been an interesting time going through a global pandemic and it's like trying to look through a crystal ball. It's full of snow, it's
and get shook. You think it settles and they shake it up again. And you're going, okay, well, I thought I could see through it. Now I can't.
Supply chain at this point, we're outselling our ability to get product, which is a great problem to have.
Yeah.
Much better than say a restaurant's dealing with, but it's a problem. And I remember our second board meeting, we walked in, hey y'all, the growth we thought we could hit, there's not enough stuff in the world right now for us to go get to do that.
Right.
And that's where Porch Pass came to be. And that's why having the right investors and the right board members is so critical. That was right in, it had to be our second board meeting, 2 months after the close on the seed round. And frankly, I was nervous going into it, but it was having the right people led to discussions about, well, we can't do this. What else is on our roadmap that we can bring closer to the priority and focus on that?
Right.
And so that's, with Porch Pass, there's not supply chain limitations on capital. you know, the way there is on lumber or insulation that you need to build a house. And so I expect that porch pass becomes a very large component of what Braustin is, that has very different needs as a company or a company structure than the retail sales part of it does.
Right.
And so it's different people you got to hire. Like we just hired a CFO. There are so many acronyms with bankers and in that world. We got our first facility with a bank, but I'm, no joke, Googling half the stuff mid Zoom call so I can at least sound like I know what the heck I'm talking about. So having someone that actually does is critical.
Yeah.
But we at this point, it's figuring out who are the specialists in that. Like we're looking for a VP of engineering as we need to double down on the size of our dev teams. And so in terms of the next fundraise, going back to what Pat Matthews said, if we get to a point where we are not moving as fast as we want to and know we could and should because of lack of capital, then that's the time to go raise. At this point, we're still fortunate in that Braustin makes money. It's a sustainable, revenue-driven business, cash flow positive, all the things that we built in those first 4 years because we had to.
Right.
Making money is a muscle you have to build. It's very hard to go from losing money and then flip a switch into making money. That's not how that works, right? So we're fortunate in that muscle of the business is very strong and well tuned, and it pays for a lot of this growth, just like it always has. Devs are not inexpensive, but when sales does their part, there's money to go invest in that new team player. But we'll see. We get asked a lot when the next fundraise round's coming, and I imagine it will come at some point, but we're not in a rush. What we've learned is it's to everybody's benefit, all of our stakeholders' benefits, to get as far as we can without it, and then once we're ready and have proof in the pudding for all sorts of things, it's easier to go raise with an idea that actually people pay for than just a hope and dream of a maybe this will work kind of thing. No,
that's great. Well, Alberto, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing. This has been a great conversation. Again, just to, for those that are out there thinking, can I do it on my own? The answer is yes. And what you think about today, because I'm sure you would have never thought of Porch Pass, in 2016, 2017. I mean, you're now innovating in ways that, you probably never thought, and we'll continue to do that. And so we wish you the best. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
So if you're listening to us on our audio version, go ahead and subscribe, whether you're on Apple or on Spotify or any other platforms. If you're on our YouTube channel, again, leave us a comment or also subscribe to us. Just let us know that we're providing value. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.